China is stepping up its space exploration goals. Just this year, it sent 3 astronauts rocketing up to its own space station, a facility still under construction, with an expected stay of 3 months. But the country appears to have even bigger orbital aspirations.
谁开发谁利用。如果今天我们能去而不去，我们后人就会在太空权益上遇到我们今天在海洋问题上一样的问题。为了维护我们太空权益，我们一定要去。
Some say Beijing's ambitions seek to challenge U.S. dominance in space, first on the moon and maybe one day on Mars. Tune in to today's special report where we examine where China's space program is headed and the motivations behind it. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Beijing is striving to make its space dreams come true. But some say those ambitions pose a challenge to U.S. dominance in space travel. NASA Chief Bill Nelson seems to be taking notice, warning that when China received its first photograph back from Mars,
and it is a very aggressive competitor.
In this special report, we examine exactly what China is striving toward and how it plans to achieve those aspirations. First, let's look at the country's achievements in recent years. It's clear that Beijing has been working hard to develop its space exploration efforts. Earlier this year in mid-June, 3 Chinese astronauts docked on China's space station Tiangong. It's currently under construction in Earth's low orbit, and China has been sending up sections of the modular space station since May. Its expected completion is set for next year. The 3 astronauts will take up a 3-month residence there. It's part of Beijing's plan for the station to keep Tiangong populated with at least 3 space travelers at all times for at least the next decade. The country didn't keep quiet about the plan either. Showing confidence in the mission's success, the astronauts' launch was shown live on TV. Authorities also held news briefings for select media outlets and arranged interviews with astronauts. The morning of June 16th, China's spacecraft Shenzhou-12 was greeted by clear skies. Following a successful launch, it rocketed through space on a 6-hour and 32-minute journey, later connecting with the space station. The deputy director of China's space program called the docking process perfect, adding that the mission fully achieved China's original goal. All 3 astronauts aboard the station are Chinese Communist Party or CCP members. Their ascent into space also coincided with the Chinese Communist Party's 100th anniversary, marking when it first took power in China. One video widely circulated online captured the 3 men saluting the occasion from the station's core module. The mission's commander, General Nie of China's military, explained that this trip to space will pose a greater challenge than those before it. That's because the astronauts need to verify crucial technology on board, on top of having to arrange the station's core module. The completion of Tiangong in 2022 will mark another milestone for Beijing's ambitious space program. That's on top of its other recent missions, like bringing samples back from the moon and landing a robotic rover on Mars. But those efforts are far from the end of Beijing's send-ups to space. To watch today's full special report, click the link in the description down below. We are working with the Epoch TV, and all Friday special reports are published there in full length. Now we turn to today's daily news. U.S. President Joe Biden spoke by phone with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping for about 90 minutes on Thursday. The Chinese Communist Party leader seems to see hope now, following what was a difficult period between the 2 powers.
U.S. President Joe Biden spoke with Chinese leader Xi Jinping on the phone for about 90 minutes on Thursday. It's the second time the 2 leaders have spoken since Biden took office in January. Both agreed for the need to avoid letting competition between the world's 2 largest economies veer into conflict. A senior U.S. official said the conversation focused on economic issues, climate change, and COVID-19. A White House statement described the discussion as broad and strategic. Chinese state media, for its part, said it was candid and in-depth, adding that President Xi said U.S. policy on China imposed great difficulties on relations between the 2. Ties between Washington and Beijing have been at their lowest point in decades. The 2 sides have been at loggerheads over a range of issues from human rights to climate change, and transparency over the origins of the pandemic. The Biden administration has signaled that its recent withdrawal from Afghanistan will give the U.S. the space to focus on more pressing threats stemming from the communist regime. Meanwhile, Beijing has been quick to seize on the U.S. failure in Afghanistan to try to portray Washington as a fickle partner.
In the talk, Xi Jinping quoted a Chinese poem to describe the U.S. and China relationship as it stands now. The poem says, after endless mountains and rivers that leave doubt whether there is a path out, suddenly one encounters the shade of a willow, bright flowers, and a lovely village. It seems that Xi Jinping isn't the only one with this sentiment. Wall Street's main indexes opened higher on Friday at signs of easing tensions between the two countries. Even though both Xi Jinping and some on Wall Street may see the talk as a sign of reduced tensions between the U.S. and the Chinese regime, it may not be that simple. An analyst explains.
One of the main purposes of this talk is to re-establish a certain level of communication or contact between the two sides.
But NTD's China affairs analyst Tang Jingyuan believes such communication does not mean the two sides' tensions are easing.
On the contrary, I think it indicates that in the near future, the competition and conflict may, in many areas, become more intense.
Hours after President Biden hung up the phone, news outlets reported that his administration is considering launching an investigation into China's state subsidies that give their companies unfair trade advantages. The investigation is reportedly to be conducted under Section 301 of the U.S. trade law. The law allows the U.S. government to respond to unfair practices that hurt American businesses. Former President Donald Trump launched a similar investigation under the law before firing off his trade war against China. Tang argued the phone call could be compared to an announcement before a car speeds up, telling the passengers to buckle up for the rocky road ahead.
It means that both sides have agreed to manage the risk and avoid direct armed conflict between them.
Meanwhile, Biden recently confirmed that he will attend an in-person meeting with the leaders of the Quad. The group is made of the U.S., India, Australia, and Japan. It's designed to check the Chinese regime's aggression in the Indo-Pacific and has been compared to the NATO of Asia. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping reportedly told German Chancellor Angela Merkel he wants the EU to take a correct approach towards China. This during a telephone meeting on Friday. An important topic for China that was brought up during the call is the EU-China Comprehensive Agreement on Investment. Xi Jinping told Merkel that he hopes the agreement will be ratified soon. The investment deal is a treaty that promotes closer commercial cooperation between China and the EU. Under the deal, more European companies will do business in China. This will then give China a degree of economic leverage over the EU. But now there are doubts about whether the deal will be ratified. That's because EU-China relations are not currently at their best. Beijing has sanctions on 5 EU lawmakers, and the EU has sanctions on Chinese officials as well. According to Chinese state-run Xinhua news agency, Merkel said the deal is a win-win for the EU and China and hopes it can be ratified as soon as possible. The two leaders also discussed Afghanistan, the pandemic, bilateral relations, economic policy, and climate change. In recent years, perceptions of China have plummeted among the German public. A recent survey shows a large majority of the respondents are in favor of taking a tougher stance towards China, even if the economy suffers. Less than 20% are against a tougher stance towards the communist country. The Taliban have reportedly postponed their plans to inaugurate their new Afghan government. CNN News 18 sources said the militant group was going to hold the ceremony on September 11th, but changed it under pressure from their allies. The news came Friday, shortly after Russia reportedly said it would not join the event if it was on 9/11, the 20th anniversary of the terrorist attacks in the U.S. Indian news broadcaster WION said it reports saying the U.S. had also been invited, as well as China, Pakistan, Iran, and Qatar. There are no reports of other RSVPs, but CNN says Russia had previously accepted their invite, and the Taliban has not set another date yet. On Wednesday, the Taliban had announced the members in its new cabinet. They hope to be recognized as a legitimate government internationally. But so far, countries around the world have been slow to place complete trust in the militant group. The Chinese view of 9/11 may be drastically different from America's. Most Americans see the acts of terror that day as an atrocity. But does China see it that way? It could be argued that the events of 9/11 actually benefited the communist nation. NTD's Don Ma has more.
From the U.S.'s perspective, the September 11th attack was a tragedy. But from China's point of view, it may have been a blessing. This is because it may have diverted the U.S.'s attention away from confronting China. Before 9/11 2001, signs pointed to a trajectory of collision between the U.S. and China. And China wasn't going to come out on top. Then President George Bush labeled Beijing as a strategic competitor. The label was a clear departure from the Clinton administration's policy of forging a strategic partnership with China. And in April 2001, an incident happened that brought U.S. China relations to a new low. It's called the Hainan Island incident. It's where an U.S. aircraft collided with a Chinese aircraft mid-air. The U.S. aircraft was forced to make an emergency landing in Hainan province. Chinese authorities later detained and interrogated U.S. crew members. Americans at the time were troubled by this. President Bush also challenged China's red line regarding Taiwan. He allowed the then Taiwanese president to have a 2-day visit to New York in May 2001. No doubt, that struck a nerve with China. There were concerns at the time that the U.S. and China were headed towards a confrontation. But then the September 11 attackers struck, and it changed everything. With the United States national security compromised, China was no longer a major concern for the Bush administration. It redirected its attention to al-Qaeda. China also saw the attack as a way to mend relations with the U.S. The Chinese leader at the time immediately offered his sympathies and support to Bush, following up with a telephone call. With the U.S.'s attention focused on the Middle East and Afghanistan, China started developing its economy. From 2001 to 2010, China more than quadrupled the size of its economy. Some analysts say that without 9/11, China may not be where it is today. Don Ma, NTD News.
A pro-Chinese regime social media campaign expands to new platforms. It even tried to mobilize Americans to protest in the U.S. That's according to a Wednesday report from cybersecurity firm Mandiant and experts at Google. The network tried to mobilize Asian Americans to protest against claims that the CCP virus was initiated in a Chinese lab. The vice president of Mandiant didn't mention the Chinese regime directly, but he told the Wall Street Journal the operation was likely supported by a government sponsor. Experts at Google said the operation was identified in 2019 during the pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. Hundreds of accounts attempted to discredit the protests. Now the network has expanded to include 7 languages, dozens of social media platforms, and over 40 websites and forums. Narratives of the Chinese Communist Party about COVID-19 has been a major focus of those fake accounts. They have pushed the claim that the virus emerged in the U.S. before China. Much of the information echoes the Chinese state-run media, and they are consistent with the regime's other propaganda too. Experts from Google said it's almost like they are being paid by volume. Chinese authorities are reportedly evicting people in 2,000 Beijing households, and locals there tell us it's all in violation of their contracts.
The Chinese Communist Party is forcing mass evacuation on residents in an area of Beijing. That's according to locals there. They told NTD that so-called security guards use many means to kick people out, and that the police say the district government ordered them not to respond. It started with the government violating contracts they signed with residents from 2015. Local governments were selling real estate through a rent-to-purchase scheme. The contract says home buyers can rent for 20 years. They may choose to purchase during this time, with the rental costs going towards part of the mortgage. The contract says it will renew automatically afterward, with no extra costs. However, residents in the community were told to evacuate last month. Authorities said rent-to-purchase contracts violate government regulations. The residents told the Epoch Times a lawyer made it clear the contracts are valid. They also questioned the absence of official paperwork for the evacuation. The Epoch Times sought comment from related government offices for comment, but could get none. As to compensation, the authorities again ignored the contract. Defying the formal 200% violation compensation rate, they offered less than 4%, which is equivalent to most banks' long-term saving interest rate. Locals told NTD this should not be happening.
This is totally unacceptable to any homeowners.
But the evacuation team refused to honor the contract.
They themselves signed the contract with us. Now they don't admit it. It's just that they don't want to compensate us that much. They refuse to talk, saying that's it.
Residents say the cruelty of the team hired to evict them shocked them. Disguised as security guards, the team used grim force.
For example, a girl. She opened the door for them. They took pictures of the room and dragged the girl out of her home, threw her possessions at the doorway, and emptied the room. They set fires in the corridor. Some homeowners' peephole cameras got the footage. They noticed that and began to dismantle their cameras. They searched door to door. If no one opened the door, they would remove the cameras. The one on my door got removed.
Another resident, Ms. Chen, said they set fires nearby 4 times in August.
The evacuators set the garbage in the corridor on fire. They wanted to scare the residents away.
She said forced evacuations continue daily.
They use poor quality glue to stick propaganda posters on the corridor walls. Many people have asthma and are sensitive to that smell. An old lady told them not to glue near her door. They didn't listen and quarreled, and the old lady fainted.
She complained about their inhumane behavior. The police told them any residents who want to unlock their doors must sign an agreement to hand over their property.
They don't care about our legal right of residence. They're determined to cut off your life. These people have the government on their back. When they needed money, they sold the houses and collected money from people. When the property appreciates, they want to make money out of it and try every way to kick you out to process the property.
She said now that the information from this district is blocked, they have no way to spread the message.
If you're interested in a short weekly summary of what's really going on in China and some behind-the-scenes content of what we're up to, make sure you subscribe to our China in Focus newsletter. You can find the link to sign up in the description box down below. Every Friday morning, the latest will land in your inbox. And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching. See you next time.